Hello there, and welcome to the Sleepless Scientist, a quiet place in the cosmos where your thoughts can slow down and the night has room to stretch. Tonight, we'll wander into a question that has been lingering in the folds of dreams for as long as people have been closing their eyes. What if every dream you've ever had was not a random invention of your mind, but a window into another world? Before we step through that idea, I'd like you to get comfortable. Perhaps dim the lights, let the air settle, and notice the quiet around you. You don't need to hold on tightly to every word. You can let them pass like gentle ripples, knowing the story will carry you whether you follow each detail or simply drift. Think back to the last dream you remembered. Maybe it was last night, or weeks ago, or so long ago that it feels like it belongs to another version of you entirely. You might recall fragments. A room whose furniture you knew instinctively but could never draw from memory. A conversation with someone whose face you understood without needing to see it. A street that felt familiar even though you could never name the city. There's a peculiar kind of intimacy in these dream moments, as though you're visiting a place you once lived but can't remember moving away from. Most of the time, we accept dreams as the mind's private theatre. A space where scraps of memory, emotion, and imagination drift together and perform for us while we sleep. The sets change without warning, the actors forget their lines, and the plot loops in impossible ways. Yet every so often, there's a dream that refuses to fade entirely. You wake with the feeling that something about it was real, and not just real in the "it felt real at the time" sense, but real in a way that follows you into the day. It's as if some part of you is still standing on that dream street, still holding the thread of a conversation you didn't finish. What if those moments were not simply the brain replaying old material in a new order, but glimpses into somewhere else? Somewhere you are, but not here. Somewhere your life is unfolding differently, yet you carry enough of yourself between these worlds to recognize the shape of it when it appears in sleep. The thought isn't entirely new. Ancient cultures often treated dreams as journeys, not metaphorical ones, but actual travels of the self, stepping out of the body and into other realms. Shamans, mystics, and poets spoke of moving through worlds that lay alongside our own, connected not by roads or oceans, but by the soft, unmeasured space between thoughts. In these traditions, waking and dreaming were not opposites, but neighbours. To dream was to visit, and to wake was to return. Modern science has, of course, drawn maps of sleep that look quite different. Researchers speak of cycles and stages, brain waves and chemical changes. These are useful and fascinating, and we'll explore them soon. But there is room, even within those maps, for mystery. The same mind that measures electrical activity in a dreaming brain can't yet explain why a dream street feels as if you've walked it many times, or why a stranger in a dream can look into your eyes and leave you feeling known. Part of the wonder of this question, this idea of dreams as windows, is that it doesn't demand you choose between science and story. You can acknowledge the careful work of neurons and still wonder whether they might sometimes open doors you didn't expect. You can understand memory as a biological process and still feel that something beyond memory is brushing against you in the dark. So tonight, we'll travel gently through both the measurable and the mysterious. We'll talk about the rhythms of sleep and what the brain is doing when it builds a dream. We'll look at why certain dreams seem to carry more weight, as if they've brought something across a border. We'll imagine the possibility, tentative but tantalizing, that some of those dreams are not invented at all but received. If this is true, even in part, it changes the way we might look at our own nights. Instead of treating dreams as curious but disposable, like postcards from a friend you barely know, we might see them as dispatches from another self. The version of you who took the job you turned down. The version of you who lives by the sea instead of inland. The version of you who met someone at the right moment and never let them go. These selves might be living in their own complete worlds, as vivid to them as this one is to you, and perhaps, sometimes, the distance between you is just thin enough for a glance to pass through. I can't tell you for certain that this is what happens when you dream. No one can. but I can tell you that it is possible to approach each dream with a little more attention, and in doing so to find a kind of wonder that stays with you through the day. And if all this turns out to be nothing more than the mind's nightly play, well, what a remarkable play it is. One that can move us, inspire us, and leave us with a sense of having been somewhere beautiful, even if we can't find it on any map. For now, let's just hold the question lightly. Not as a puzzle to be solved, but as a lantern we can carry as we wander. There's no rush to find an answer. In the chapters to come, we'll explore what sleep does to the mind, what dreams might be doing for us, and how both science and speculation leave space for this idea of windows into other worlds. And as we go, if your thoughts start to drift into your own dreamscapes, that's perfectly fine. After all, this is their territory, and they may be waiting for you. There's a peculiar kind of memory that doesn't seem to belong entirely to waking life. You might be walking down a street, your mind occupied with ordinary things, a list of groceries, the sound of your shoes, the pattern of light on the pavement, when suddenly a corner ahead feels like a page you've already read. You turn it, and every shape and shadow feels inevitable, as though the scene has been waiting for you, perfectly still since the last time you passed through. The moment might last only a second before you shake it off, telling yourself it's just déjà vu. A quirk of the brain, nothing more. That's the explanation most of us have learned. A brief misfire in the timing of memory, so the present moment feels as though it has already been stored away. Yet this explanation doesn't quite account for the weight some of these moments carry. Sometimes déjà vu arrives, not as a flicker, but as a wave. You feel not only that you've been here before, but that something, someone, is missing, as though you've stepped into the middle of a conversation that began long ago, in a place you can't quite name. For many people, these moments echo something stranger. A dream they half remember, a dream where they walked the same street, past the same cafe with the window open and the sound of cutlery inside, saw the same stray cat watching from the curb. In the dream, it all felt natural, but waking up, they dismissed it. Dreams often borrow from life, after all. But when life borrows from the dream, down to the turn of the light, the smell in the air, it's harder to wave away. Some people collect these moments like seashells, storing them quietly and wondering why they feel so important. They might not talk about them often, because déjà vu is so easily dismissed, but inside they keep returning to the idea. What if this wasn't just the brain repeating itself? What if this was a reminder, a small slip in the wall between worlds, letting something from there step briefly into here? The possibility isn't as far from our daily experience as it might seem. In dreams, the mind is a shapeshifter, taking scraps of memory, imagination, and pure invention, and weaving them into landscapes that feel complete. We often visit places in dreams that do not exist in waking life. A city with a skyline we've never seen, a house whose rooms we know, but whose street we couldn't find on any map. And yet these places carry the familiarity of home. Some dreamers report returning to the same place night after night or month after month over years. Sometimes the setting changes slightly, a building painted a different colour, a tree taller than before, but the bones of the place remain the same. It is as though they are visiting another city that continues to exist even when they are gone, changing and growing while they are away. If we think of dreams as only the mind's creation, this is already remarkable. The brain is maintaining a complex, consistent environment over time without conscious effort. But if we allow ourselves to wonder, just for the length of this night's conversation, what if that place exists somewhere? Not here, in the streets we walk by day, but in a parallel fold of reality, where another version of you lives and moves, and where the same stray cat sits at the same curb. These repeating dream locations could be more than a quirk of memory. They could be a kind of address, a point where two worlds happen to overlap enough for you to notice. And déjà vu could be the waking recognition of having stood there before, even if you can't remember all the times you've crossed that threshold. The thought is as unsettling as it is comforting. It suggests that there are other versions of your story unfolding, and that sometimes, without warning, the threads touch. You may never know what else is happening in that other life. You may never meet the people who wave to you from across the invisible street. But there is something gentle in the idea that you are not as separate from them as you might think. Of course, we can explain déjà vu in purely neurological terms. Neuroscientists point to the brain's temporal lobe, to the delicate timing by which new sensory information is filed into memory. If a slight delay occurs, the brain may interpret the new input as something already remembered. This is a tidy explanation, and in many cases it fits. But it doesn't quite erase the feeling that some déjà vu carries, that pulse of recognition that feels deeper than a filing error. And here is where science and wonder can coexist. The brain is capable of making meaning from the smallest cues, capable of layering emotions over the barest fragments of memory. But perhaps those capacities also make it sensitive to connections we don't yet understand, subtle alignments between the life we know and another that is unfolding elsewhere. Think of it like hearing a faint echo in the middle of a familiar song. The melody continues as expected, but somewhere in the background, just for a heartbeat, you hear a harmony you didn't know was there. You can't be sure where it came from, or if you'll ever hear it again, but in that moment the song feels larger, richer, as though it's part of a music you've only just begun to notice. Déjà vu might be that hidden harmony. Dreams might be the place where it plays more clearly, where the mind can lean into the sound without being pulled back by the noise of waking life. And when the two overlap, when a waking moment feels like stepping into a dream you've already walked, perhaps we're closer to that other music than we realize. In the end, whether déjà vu is a trick of memory or a slip between worlds, it holds a quiet gift. It reminds us that our sense of reality is not fixed, that the ordinary can shimmer with the strange without losing its gentleness. And if, in that shimmer, you feel a hand on the edge of your own, whether from memory or from another self entirely, perhaps it's worth pausing for a moment, just to see if the connection lingers. If you could watch the night from somewhere just outside yourself, you might be surprised by how much movement there is in stillness. Sleep is not a single, unbroken drift. It is a journey with its own landscapes and weather, moving in gentle loops that repeat again and again until morning comes. The body seems still, the room unchanged, yet within you, the night is unfolding in stages as distinct as the chapters of a book. The first chapter begins in the shallowest waters. You're only partly here, your thoughts loosening from the day but still within reach of it. This is the place where you might feel yourself tipping forward as if you're stepping off a curb, or hear your name whispered in a way that jolts you gently awake. Scientists call this the lightest stage of sleep. But in a more poetic sense, it is the place where your mind begins to unlace its boots and set them aside. The journey is only just starting. From there, you drift into deeper currents. The second stage is quieter, heavier. Your heart slows, your breath deepens, and the world beyond your closed eyes slips further away. In this part of the night, the mind is tending to practical work, sorting the day's events, letting the body repair itself in ways you can't feel directly. It is like the part of a journey where the scenery outside is a blur, and you trust that you're being carried forward even if you're not watching the road. Then comes the deepest stage of all, where the body's roots sink into the soil of rest. Here, the mind is almost entirely inward. You would be difficult to wake, and if you were, you might feel momentarily lost, as though the room is not quite your own. In this depth, the body releases growth hormones, muscles rebuild, and immune systems strengthen. It is the night's most secret workshop, hidden from your conscious mind, but essential for everything you will do when you wake. And then, without a sound, the scene changes. The mind quickens. The breath becomes lighter, more irregular. Beneath closed eyelids, the eyes begin to move as though tracking something just out of sight. This is REM sleep, the stage most famously tied to dreaming, and if the earlier stages are rivers of dark water, REM is the lantern-lit canal where stories float past. The brain is active now, in some ways almost as active as it is when you are awake, yet the body remains still, muscles softened into a safe paralysis that keeps you from acting out the dream script. These stages are not a straight road from start to finish, but a cycle that repeats. Light sleep, deeper sleep, REM, and back again, several times each night. Early in the night, the deep stages take up more time, anchoring you in recovery. Later, as the dawn approaches, REM periods grow longer, giving more space to dreams. This is why the dreams you have just before waking often feel the most vivid, the most complete. They are the ones given the largest stage before the curtain rises on the day. If you were to look at a chart of these cycles, it would resemble a slow tide, ebbing and flowing between depths and surface. But from inside the experience, it feels less like an ocean, and more like a journey on a train through a series of stations. You pass through each one, again and again, and although the order is the same, the scenery each time can shift. Sometimes the dream station is quiet, with only a brief image before you're carried away. Sometimes it is bustling with entire worlds, and you linger there until you forget you are travelling at all. The rhythm of these cycles matters. It is the reason that waking abruptly from deep sleep can leave you feeling disoriented, while waking from REM can leave you with the bright afterimage of a dream still in your mind. It is also the reason that missing certain stages through stress, irregular schedules, or illness can make you feel as though you never truly rested, even if you were in bed for hours. Sleep is more than a matter of time. It is a matter of balance, of letting each part of the night have its turn. Understanding this rhythm does not make it less magical. In fact, it makes the mystery more beautiful. The brain is not simply shutting down at night. It is moving through an intricate dance that has been refined over millions of years, each step with its own purpose. And in the middle of that dance, at certain intervals, the mind opens its stage to dreams, to images and feelings that can seem to come from somewhere beyond the self. When we talk about dreams as possible windows into other worlds, this rhythm is part of the frame. The stillness of the deep stages clears the space, and the heightened activity of REM opens the shutters. The mind is both unguarded and fully engaged, a rare combination that might make it easier for unusual signals, whether from within or beyond us, to slip through. Perhaps that is why the most vivid dreams so often come toward morning. It is not just that REM is longer by then, but that the night's earlier work has prepared you for it. Your body has mended, your mind has sorted, and now there is room for something else to arrive. An image, a voice, a landscape that feels borrowed from another version of your story. When you wake from one of these dreams, it can feel as though you have been travelling, not only through your own mind, but through places you cannot name. And maybe, in a sense, you have. The night's hidden rhythm carries you there and back again, without your ever needing to steer. All you do is close your eyes and trust that, while the body lies still, the journey continues. When the sun is up, your mind is busy balancing the world's demands. It keeps time, follows rules, reads signals, weighs decisions. Even the smallest task, answering a message, crossing a street, involves layers of judgment and order. This daytime mind is like the stage manager of a long-running play, efficient, alert, ready to call for a pause if anything goes wrong. But when you drift into sleep, that stage manager quietly steps away. The clipboard is set down, the lights dim, and a different crew takes over. The mind does not go silent. It simply changes hands. The spotlight shifts from the precise, rule-bound areas to the imaginative ones, the ones that can create a forest from a few scattered shadows, or turn a passing thought into a whole story. In this nightly shift, the emotional centers of the brain come alive in a way they rarely do during the day. Feelings flow without the same filters that keep them in check while you're awake. Joy can expand to fill an entire landscape. Fear can twist the shape of the air itself. The mind is free to give emotion the lead role, while logic sits in the audience, quietly watching. Meanwhile, memory begins its quiet work in the background. Pieces of the day are lifted and examined. The sound of rain on the roof during breakfast, the flash of a headline, the way someone's voice trembled slightly when they spoke to you. Some are set aside for storage, others are blended with older memories, and some are simply let go. This backstage sorting is constant, yet it often feels invisible, because the dreaming mind is busy weaving these threads into something else entirely. Sometimes this weaving produces familiar faces and places, but other times you meet someone you don't recognize from waking life, and yet, in the dream, you know them. There is no introduction, no hesitation, only the certainty that you have shared years together, even if you couldn't say how. You might speak to them with the ease of an old friend, or feel the ache of missing them before the dream even ends. These strangers of the dream world are not always invented out of nothing. They might be composites, a patchwork of features from people you've glimpsed without remembering, combined with traits from your imagination. Or they might be borrowed from deeper wells, from the mind's quiet connections that you rarely notice when you're awake. When the dreaming brain sets its stage, it does not build the same kind of world your waking brain prefers. It doesn't need straight roads, or consistent physics, or even the same rules of cause and effect. It can place a childhood home next to a city you've never visited. It can let you breathe underwater or speak in languages you've never studied. The goal is not to make sense, at least not in the way daylight defines sense, but to let scenes unfold in a way that feels right in the moment. And within these scenes, your emotions have room to stretch in all directions. A simple gesture, someone handing you a letter, or turning away without a word, can carry more weight than entire pages of dialogue. The dreaming mind doesn't ask you to explain why it matters. It trusts that you'll feel it. Perhaps this is why certain dreams linger. They are not anchored in the logic of a sequence of events, but in the resonance of a feeling that carries over when you wake. You may not remember the dream in full, but you remember the way it felt to be in it. That feeling is a piece of the stage that remains after the scenery has been taken down. When you think of the dreaming brain as a stage, it becomes easier to imagine how unusual things might slip in. A theatre is a place for stories, and not all stories come from within. Some might be echoes from something you've read or heard, and others might be impressions from somewhere you can't quite place, as if the theatre's doors opened briefly and let in a whisper from outside. For now, it is enough to see the dreaming brain as a space where the usual rules are set aside. The logic that governs waking life takes a step back, and imagination, emotion, and memory work together without interruption. This is the stage where your nightly stories will play out, some assembled from familiar parts, others made from things you have never consciously known, and perhaps, somewhere among those unfamiliar things, there are glimpses of another self, living another life, on another stage entirely. When people speak about dreams, they often focus on what they mean, the symbols, the hidden messages, the strange logic that invites interpretation. But before we start decoding, it's worth pausing to remember that dreaming is not only a mystery to solve, it is also a kind of work carried out quietly each night, whether we are aware of it or not. The brain, even in sleep, does not simply rest. It continues to manage an enormous network of tasks, some so subtle that we can only guess at them. One of the clearest roles of dreaming seems to be in memory, not just storing it, but shaping it. Picture a desk at the end of a long day, papers scattered, notes crumpled, small objects you don't remember putting there. Dreaming is like the hand that comes in after hours, sorting the mess into neat stacks, deciding what to keep and what to throw away. A conversation you had that morning might be placed neatly in the important pile, while a random sound from the street outside might be tossed into the bin, never to be recalled. This process is not mechanical, it is creative. The dreaming mind doesn't only file memories as they are, it edits them, rearranges them, tests them in new contexts. You might dream about a conversation with a friend, only in the dream it takes place on a moving train instead of a cafe. Or you might rehearse an argument that hasn't happened yet, trying out different outcomes without even realizing you're doing it. This is rehearsal in the truest sense, the mind trying on lines before the real performance. Another job of dreaming is emotional housekeeping. Some feelings are simple enough to manage while awake. Mild frustrations, brief joys, passing disappointments. Others are heavier, more tangled. They may be too much for the mind to fully handle in the middle of the day, when there are errands to run, people to greet, tasks to finish. So they wait for night. In dreams, the emotional centers of the brain are free to stretch without interruption. Here, you can grieve without having to explain yourself, feel joy without worrying about how long it will last, face fear without the danger being real. Sometimes this comes in the form of obvious symbols, storms, locked doors, open fields, and sometimes it is simply the mood of the dream itself, a quiet sadness or a warm contentment that shapes everything you see. There is also the rehearsal of danger. In evolutionary terms, some researchers believe dreams once served, and may still serve, as safe simulations for survival. Our ancestors might have benefited from dreaming about threats, practicing responses without facing real harm. Even now, you might dream of running from something, navigating a difficult path, or solving a problem under pressure. These scenarios, though unreal, could strengthen the brain's readiness for challenges in waking life. But dreaming is not all duty. It also has a knack for wandering into pure creativity. History is full of examples. The melody that came to a composer in the middle of the night, the structure of a molecule glimpsed in a dream by a chemist, the plot of a novel arriving fully formed to an author before dawn. These moments are gifts, but they are also reminders of how dreaming works, by taking what you know, what you felt, and what you've imagined, and letting them mingle in ways waking logic would never permit. It's tempting to think of each of these roles, memory sorting, emotional processing, danger rehearsal, creative problem solving, as separate jobs, like workers in different offices. But in the dreaming mind, they blur together. While you're rehearsing a conversation, you might also be softening the emotions tied to it. While you're navigating an unfamiliar city, you might be stitching together fragments of memories from entirely different times in your life. And while you're imagining something new, you might be solving a problem that has been troubling you for weeks. All of this happens in the quiet backstage of the mind, where the lights are low and the rules are looser. Waking life is full of interruptions, dreaming life is not. Once you're asleep, the mind can follow a thread as far as it wants to go, without being called away to answer the phone or cross the street. And yet, for all this activity, dreams can feel effortless. You do not have to direct the work, or even know it is happening. You only need to let the night take its course. By morning, much of what needed doing has been done. Memories have been sorted, feelings untangled, possibilities rehearsed. You may not remember the details, but you carry the results with you into the day in the form of clearer thought, steadier emotions, or an idea that seems to arrive from nowhere. Understanding these many jobs of dreaming doesn't make them any less magical. If anything, it deepens the mystery. Because alongside these clear, functional purposes, there are dreams that seem to defy any tidy explanation. They do not feel like the sorting of a desk or the rehearsal of a play. They feel like something else entirely. A story you walked into and lived, if only for a few moments, before waking in a bed that feels just slightly foreign for the first few seconds. It is in these dreams, perhaps, that the ordinary jobs of the brain and the possibility of something beyond begin to overlap. Dreams may be doing their nightly housekeeping, but maybe, just maybe, they're also holding the door open long enough for something unexpected to step through. By now, you could piece together a tidy picture of what dreams are for. You could say they are the mind's filing system, its emotional workshop, its rehearsal space for the unexpected. You could point to research and brain scans and evolutionary reasoning, and you would not be wrong. Those explanations have weight, and they help us understand why sleep and dreaming are so important. And yet, there are always those dreams that don't quite fit inside the frame. Theories can explain why you might dream about your old school, or a stressful meeting, or a mix of people and places from your recent days. But what about the dream where you're walking down a street you've never seen, in a city that has never existed, yet everything about it feels familiar in a way that shakes you? What about the dream where you meet someone who speaks to you with the warmth of an old friend, though you're certain you've never met them in waking life? These are not the dreams that vanish in the first few minutes after waking. They stay, like a scent you can't place, or a line from a song that loops in the back of your mind. You might catch yourself thinking about them days later, sometimes even years later, as if they were memories from an actual trip. No matter how much you tell yourself it was just a dream, a part of you wonders if it was something else. Science can offer possibilities. Perhaps these dreams are a clever blend of memory fragments, arranged so seamlessly that your mind accepts them as real. Perhaps they are the result of neurons firing in patterns your waking brain never experiences, creating sensations and emotions without clear cause. These are reasonable explanations, and they can be comforting in their own way. But they don't entirely erase the feeling that some dreams carry, that they were not crafted entirely from what you already know. Think of those rare dreams that feel almost like visits. You wake with details so specific, the pattern of tile in a doorway, the way light bent through a certain window, the exact weight of a cup in your hand, that they resist fading. These details are not grand or symbolic. They are ordinary, yet precise, and they make you wonder, if the dream was only the mind's invention, why does it feel less like fiction and more like remembering? Some people tell stories of dreams that seem to predict real events. A face glimpsed in a dream appears later in the crowd of a train station. A conversation imagined in sleep happens word for word months later. The rational mind is quick to explain this. We dream so many things, it's inevitable that a few will line up with reality by chance. But for the person who lived it, the coincidence feels different. It feels like the dream reached forward, touching something that hadn't happened yet. There are also the dreams that arrive with a sense of homecoming. These are not about strange events or dramatic visions. They're about simply being somewhere that feels like yours, even if you can't explain why. You walk through a garden you've never tended, sit at a table you've never owned, and yet the air feels exactly right. The walls seem to know you, and when you wake there's an ache, as if you've been pulled away too soon. For dreams like these, the neat explanations start to fray. They may be enough for some people, and perhaps that's all they are, intricate works of the mind that just happen to carry an unusual emotional weight. But for others, these dreams open a space for wondering. What if there is more to dreaming than the jobs we've already described? What if, every now and then, the mind is not only looking inward, but outward, catching a glimpse of something beyond itself? This is where science meets the edge of its current maps. Beyond that edge, there is room for speculation. The idea of dreams as windows into other realities has been with us for centuries, whispered in myths, woven into stories, carried quietly in the minds of those who have had dreams too vivid to dismiss. It is not something science can confirm, at least not yet. But absence of proof is not the same as proof of absence. Holding on to this possibility does not mean discarding the known purposes of dreaming. It simply means allowing that there might be more than one truth at work. Dreams can sort memories, process emotions, and rehearse survival. And perhaps, on rare nights, they can also open a door. Whether you believe that or not, there is something valuable in approaching dreams with that sense of openness. Instead of seeing them only as puzzles to solve, you can see them as invitations. You may not know exactly where they come from, but you can step into them fully while they last. And when you wake, you can carry the wonder with you, even if the details fade. Because in the end, the most important thing about those inexplicable dreams might not be proving what they are. It might be the way they remind you that reality, your reality, could be wider than you think. And in that widening, there is room for awe. Imagine for a moment that your life is not the only version of your story. Imagine that right now, in some layer of reality that you cannot see, another you is sitting in a different room, looking out a different window, making different choices. In that world, perhaps you live in a city by the ocean, or in a small house tucked into the side of a mountain. Perhaps you never met the people you know here, and instead your life is threaded with entirely different faces. These other versions of you are not copies exactly. They are simply lives that branched away from this one long ago, each carrying a part of you forward in a direction you didn't take. It's an idea that has deep roots in physics, in philosophy, and in storytelling. Some interpretations of quantum theory suggest that reality may not be a single solid path, but a vast network of possibilities unfolding side by side. When a choice is made, whether as small as turning left instead of right, or as large as moving to another country, reality could split. Both outcomes continuing to exist, but in separate streams. If this is true, then somewhere in countless parallel worlds, countless versions of you are living out those other paths. For most of us, those other lives are invisible. The separation between them and us is complete, at least during the day. But dreams are different. In sleep, the mind is not bound by the same rules that guide waking perception. You do not need your eyes to see or your ears to hear. You can move without moving, speak without speaking. You can be in two places at once, or shift between them without noticing the change. If parallel worlds exist, perhaps this looseness, this freedom from the body's usual limits, is what allows dreams to catch their whisper. The brain is like a radio, usually tuned to the single frequency of waking life. But at night, in the quiet, it may drift, just enough to pick up the faint signal of another channel. The signal may not be strong. It may be warped by the noise of your own memories and emotions, but sometimes something clear enough might slip through. The image of a street you have never walked, the voice of someone you have never met, the feeling of a choice you have never made. If you think of it this way, those inexplicable dream moments, the ones that feel too vivid to be random, could be brief alignments between worlds. Not a doorway you can step through entirely, but a window that opens just long enough for a glance. You see another life, another self, and then the window closes. You wake up, carrying the echo of it without knowing exactly where it came from. This idea is not so far from how some ancient traditions spoke about dreaming. In many cultures, dreams were not simply visions from the mind, but journeys of the spirit. The dreamer's consciousness could travel beyond the body, moving through realms that were hidden in waking life. Some of these realms were thought to be the worlds of ancestors, others the territories of gods. But the idea that the self could move beyond its ordinary boundaries is one that appears again and again, across thousands of years and thousands of miles. In a modern context, we might strip away the language of gods and spirits and speak instead of consciousness and reality. But the core of the idea is the same, that dreaming is a state where the boundaries loosen, where movement beyond the usual is possible. And if the multiverse, or something like it, exists, then those movements might include not only travelling through imagination, but brushing against other, equally real lives. Of course, science has not proven this. It may never be able to. But in the absence of proof, we are left with the evidence of experience, those dreams that arrive with the weight of reality and refuse to fade, you might not be able to prove that they are glimpses of another world. But you also can't quite convince yourself they are only shadows of your own. If this is true, if dreams sometimes carry whispers from elsewhere, then it raises quiet, unsettling questions. Do the other versions of you dream of this life in return? When you appear in their dreams, do you seem as strange to them as they do to you? Could there be nights when two dreamers in different worlds meet in the same imagined street, both believing it belongs entirely to their own mind? It is a thought both comforting and disorienting. Comforting because it means you are part of something larger than you can see, connected in ways you cannot measure. Disorienting because it suggests that you're not the sole author of your own nights, that somewhere in the background another voice may be telling part of the story. For now, the whispers remain just that, soft, fleeting, easily lost in the noise of waking life. But if you listen closely, you might notice them, in the texture of a dream that feels like memory, in the glimpse of a face you can't name but somehow love, in the quiet certainty as you wake that you've been somewhere else, and that, for a few moments, somewhere else has been here. The world you move through when you are awake is full of signals. They come in every form: light in your eyes, sound in your ears, touch on your skin, the constant hum of your own thoughts. All of these streams overlap, jostling for attention, and your mind works tirelessly to filter, sort, and respond. In this constant motion, there is little space for anything faint or unfamiliar to rise to the surface. The volume of daily life is simply too high, but at night the volume changes. The doors close, the lights dim, and the noise of waking life falls away. Your body settles, your breathing slows, and even the thoughts that felt urgent begin to drift. It is in this quiet that another kind of signal might be noticed, the kind that would be drowned out entirely during the day. If we imagine, just for a moment, that parallel worlds are real, and that each one hums with its own subtle frequency, then it's possible that your mind, in the deep stillness of sleep, could become sensitive to more than the usual. The waking mind is like a busy port, with ships constantly arriving and departing. The dreaming mind is like a harbour at night, still and open, where even the faintest ripple can be felt. The absence of distractions may be part of what allows this. While awake, your senses are tuned to immediate survival and engagement, crossing streets, reading expressions, catching a ball, noticing the change in a friend's voice. In sleep, those demands are gone. Your mind no longer needs to anchor itself to the physical environment, so it is free to wander, to listen, to catch the smallest variations in the vast background of existence. This catching might not be deliberate. In fact, it is probably entirely unintentional, more like overhearing a fragment of music as you pass by an open window than seeking out a performance. The mind drifts into the right alignment, and something slips through. A scene, a face, a sensation that doesn't belong to the day you've lived. Sometimes these signals might be faint and fragmentary. A flash of colour, a voice saying a single word, the feeling of standing somewhere else without seeing it clearly. Other times, they might be woven seamlessly into the fabric of your dream, so you never recognize them as foreign at all. You simply accept the strange street as your own, the unfamiliar person as someone you've always known. The timing could matter too. Early in the night, dreams tend to be shorter, less elaborate, as the body focuses on physical repair. Later, especially in the hours just before waking, REM periods stretch longer. The brain's activity intensifies, and dreams become more vivid. This may also be the time when the signal from another life has the best chance of making itself known, riding the heightened imagery and emotion of these late-night dreamscapes. There is also the question of sensitivity. Perhaps not every mind is equally open to this kind of reception. Some people recall their dreams almost every morning, others rarely remember a single one. The difference may not only be in memory, but in how attuned the mind is to subtle impressions. For someone deeply sensitive to these currents, the quiet of sleep might be enough to let the connection form more strongly. And yet, even if such signals exist, they do not arrive as perfect transmissions. By the time they reach you, they have travelled through the layers of your own mind, and each layer reshapes them. Your memories, emotions, and expectations all act as filters, bending the signal into something you can grasp. This is why even a clear moment from another world might arrive dressed in the colours and textures of your own. Perhaps the most intriguing thing about this idea is how ordinary it feels in practice. There is nothing visibly strange about lying in bed, eyes closed, while the mind shifts into dream. And yet, beneath that stillness, there could be a vast exchange taking place. Fragments of other realities brushing against your own, unnoticed except for the small traces they leave in the morning. It is worth remembering that even in science, some of the most significant discoveries began with faint, almost dismissible observations. The background hiss of cosmic radiation, the tiny wobble of a planet's orbit, the glimmer of a light when none was expected. In each case, the signal was nearly lost in the noise. It was only by listening carefully and for long enough that it revealed itself. Dreams could be the same. Most of what you dream may be your own mind's creation, doing the work it has always done. But perhaps, in the right conditions, with the right stillness, a dream can also be the place where you catch something from far beyond. Something that slips past the boundaries, not because you went looking for it, but because the night was quiet enough for it to arrive. And when you wake, you may not know that this is what happened. You may simply remember that the dream felt different, richer, heavier, threaded with a kind of truth you can't explain. That feeling lingering in the back of your mind all day might be the echo of a signal that came from somewhere else entirely. If you have ever woken from a dream with the strange certainty that you had been somewhere real, somewhere not built from the scraps of your own memory, you might also have noticed something else. The dream did not arrive in perfect clarity. It came wrapped in layers of familiarity, dressed in symbols and settings you could understand. That is the work of the subconscious, and it is not unlike a translator who, upon hearing a language you have never spoken, tries to render it into words you already know. The subconscious is a tireless storyteller. It works whether you're awake or asleep, always shaping the raw material of your senses and your thoughts into something you can make sense of. During the day, it edits for clarity, smoothing over inconsistencies so that the world appears stable and continuous. At night, it takes a different approach. Freed from the need to keep you grounded in a single version of reality, it becomes more experimental, willing to bend rules and mix elements in ways that the waking mind would never allow. When we imagine dreams as possibly containing signals from elsewhere, whether from another version of you or from a parallel life entirely, the subconscious is the stagehand who ensures that those signals can be presented in a way you can follow. If the image arrives in a form too alien, you might reject it entirely, but if it is woven into a pattern you already know, you can accept it without question, even if its origins lie somewhere far outside your normal experience. This is why so many dream signals, if that is what they are, arrive disguised. You may dream of a friend you know well, only to realize later that something about them was different. A face that shifted subtly, a voice that wasn't quite theirs, eyes that held a history you had never shared. You may walk through a city that feels like your own, yet the street names are wrong, the buildings unfamiliar, the skyline shaped by rules of architecture that no one here would follow. These are the fingerprints of your subconscious, adapting what might be foreign so that you can walk through it without alarm. The process is not exact. In the same way that a translator sometimes changes the meaning of a sentence to preserve its spirit, your subconscious will alter the details of what you see so that it fits into the logic of your personal dream world. The shapes of buildings may be softened, the faces of strangers blended with ones you recognize, the flow of events altered to follow an emotional thread rather than a literal one. And just like any good storyteller, the subconscious adds its own embellishments. A passing figure might be given a secret you will never know. A familiar street might be lined with flowers you have never seen, their colours brighter than anything daylight could produce. These additions are not meant to deceive. They are part of the subconscious's instinct to create a narrative that feels whole. Sometimes, this reshaping can work in the opposite direction. A dream might begin entirely within the landscape of your own mind, built from memory and imagination, and then, without warning, something foreign slips in. A detail that doesn't belong, yet refuses to be ignored. A sound in the distance that carries no source you can name, a handprint on a wall you have never touched, a fragment of music whose melody you have never heard but already know. It is in these moments that you might wonder whether the storyteller is working with more than just its usual supply of material. One of the most fascinating things about this process is that it happens without your awareness. You do not stand at the edge of your dream deciding how to interpret what you see. The subconscious does it for you, shaping and polishing before the conscious mind has a chance to weigh in. By the time you wake, the dream has already been filtered, and what you remember is a blend, part your own creation, part something you may never be able to trace. This blending can make it almost impossible to say with certainty whether any part of a dream came from somewhere else, and perhaps that is the point. If the subconscious is indeed receiving unfamiliar impressions, it may not distinguish between their origins. Its task is not to label, but to integrate, to make the experience coherent enough for you to inhabit it fully while it lasts. Even if we set aside the idea of parallel worlds entirely, this role of the subconscious is worth noticing. It shows how much of what we experience, both in dreams and in waking life, is mediated, shaped, and reframed before it reaches our awareness. The version of reality you move through each day is not raw and untouched. It is a carefully curated story, and the same is true at night. So, whether a dream is built entirely from your own history or contains a thread from another reality, it arrives in the same way, wrapped in the language of your mind, told in the voice you trust. You accept it because it feels like yours, even if it is not entirely so. And perhaps this is why some dreams linger longer than others. They are not simply stories, they are collaborations. Something beyond you may have provided the spark, but it was your subconscious that built the world around it, filled it with familiar faces, and handed it to you as a place you could walk without fear. You may never know exactly how much of it came from you, and how much from elsewhere. But in the end, perhaps the beauty of the dream lies in the fact that you lived it as if it were all your own. Some dreams are defined not by the events that happen within them, but by the quality of their light. You wake and remember little of the plot, perhaps no clear faces, no sequence of moments, and yet you remember the way the dream glowed. The colour of that glow is unlike anything daylight has shown you. It is not merely a variation of red, or blue, or gold, but something that seems to exist beyond the familiar spectrum, like a shade that your waking eyes have never learned to name. In waking life, light is bound to the physics we know, the wavelengths visible to human eyes, the way sunlight bends in the atmosphere, the way shadows behave when a lamp is turned on. But in dreams, the rules are less fixed. You might walk through a landscape where the sky is lit from beneath, or where shadows have colour instead of darkness. You might see the air itself shimmer as though it holds its own quiet source of radiance. Sometimes the light in a dream is soft, like the glow of paper lanterns seen through a mist. Other times, it is sharp and crystalline, as if each object is outlined in a brilliance that does not cast heat. There are dreams where the light feels almost alive, aware of your presence, moving with you rather than remaining fixed to a single sun or lamp. If we entertain the possibility that some dreams are touched by impressions from other worlds, then this dream light could be a trace of physics not our own. The colour that seems impossible might be the result of a different atmosphere, a different composition of the eye itself, or even a different set of physical laws that govern how light interacts with matter. The sound of air that seems to speak in tone or vibration could be the echo of a place where sound and light are not entirely separate things. In your own life, the memory of such light lingers. It can be years after the dream, and still, the moment you recall it, you know exactly how it felt to stand beneath it. That memory is not just visual. It carries with it a temperature, a density, even an emotion. Perhaps the glow was peaceful, wrapping you in calm, or perhaps it was unsettling, as if you were walking through the edge of a storm. There is a quality to this kind of dream experience that is difficult to describe to anyone who has not felt it. You can try to explain, to compare it to sunsets or candlelight or the flicker of neon on rain-wet streets, but none of these comparisons are quite right. The listener nods politely, but you know they have not seen it. What makes this so striking is how deeply the experience is tied to emotion. The light in these dreams does not just illuminate objects, it seems to illuminate your own inner state. In a strange way, it feels as if the light knows you, and you know it, even if you cannot recall the details of the place where it shone. Some dreamers report hearing sound in similar ways, not as speech, not as music, but as a resonance that seems to be part of the air itself. These sounds are not intrusive. They are woven into the space like a presence that does not need to be explained. Sometimes they are felt more than heard, like the hum you sense in your bones when standing near something vast and powerful. It is tempting to think of these sensory impressions as purely the work of the brain's creativity, a merging of remembered experiences into something novel. And perhaps they are. But they might also be what happens when your mind receives a signal it cannot translate directly, a kind of sensory accent from somewhere else. Unable to render it in the exact form, the subconscious chooses the closest possible representation, and you wake with the impression of a light, a colour, or a sound that you could not find here, even if you tried. When such a dream fades, it leaves behind a peculiar longing. You might find yourself scanning the real world for that same glow, hoping to see it in the way sunlight moves through leaves or in the shimmer of a street at night. You never quite find it, but the search becomes its own quiet habit, as if you are waiting for the dream to happen again. It may be that these moments, these glimpses of light and sound outside our waking experience, are not meant to be fully understood. They are reminders that perception is not fixed, that there may be ways of seeing and hearing beyond what our senses allow. And whether they are purely the artistry of the mind or the faint touch of another reality, they show us that even in the most familiar darkness, there can be light that belongs to no place we know. There are dreams in which the most remarkable thing is not what happens, but where it happens. You wake with the image of a place so vivid that you could sketch its streets, trace the line of its horizon, even describe the smell of the air. And yet, you know with quiet certainty that no such place exists here. You have never seen it in waking life. You have never read about it or glimpsed it in a photograph. It is not on any map you could unfold on your kitchen table. Still, in the dream you walk through it with ease. Your feet know where to turn. Your eyes recognize the patterns of the buildings, the way a certain alley curves into shadow, the way a hill lifts above the rooftops. There is no confusion, no hesitation, only the sense of moving through somewhere you have always known. Sometimes these landscapes are grand. Sweeping valleys lit by two suns, cities suspended over water so still it reflects the sky like a second world turned upside down. Sometimes they are small and quiet, a narrow street lined with green shutters, a single bench under a tree whose leaves shine with an unfamiliar shade. Dream geography does not obey the same rules as the waking world. In one moment you may be walking down a road that bends into the sea, and in the next, that same road might lead into a forest of glass towers, Distances shrink and stretch as if space itself is breathing. You can cross an entire continent in the time it takes to finish a single thought, and yet, despite the impossibility of it, the dream holds together. You do not stop to question how the mountain appeared where a field had been. You simply keep walking, trusting the path beneath your feet. If these landscapes are products of the mind alone, they are extraordinary feats of invention, worlds assembled overnight from fragments of memory, pieces of books, films, photographs, and imagination. But if we allow ourselves to consider that dreams may catch whispers from other realities, then these landscapes might be more than invention. They could be glimpses of actual places, existing beyond the reach of our waking senses, shaped by rules we do not yet understand. The sense of familiarity is perhaps the most haunting part. Why should a place that does not exist here feel so deeply like home? Why should the curve of a distant hill, the sound of wind through a street you've never walked, fill you with the comfort of belonging? Perhaps it is because these places are not entirely foreign to you. If there are other versions of you, living in other threads of reality, then some part of you may have walked those streets before, just not in this life. Some dreamers speak of returning to the same places again and again across the years. The details may shift slightly, a different season, a change in the skyline, but the bones of the place remain the same. It becomes a kind of personal geography, one that exists only in sleep. These recurring dreamscapes can feel more constant than some waking memories. You might forget the layout of a city you once visited in this life, but you will remember every turn in the streets of your dream world. It's in these repeated visits that the sense of connection deepens. A single dream could be dismissed as coincidence or invention, but when you return night after night, year after year, it begins to feel like a place you truly inhabit. You may even develop favourite spots. A doorway you always pause beside, a bridge where you linger to watch the water. These details, small and ordinary, give the landscape weight, as if it exists whether or not you're there to see it. If you were to map these dream places, the maps would likely be incomplete, full of blank spaces and impossible distances. Yet the parts that are clear would feel solid, as if they could withstand the scrutiny of someone else walking there. Perhaps in some other version of reality they could. Of course, even if these landscapes come from somewhere else, they must still pass through the filter of your mind. Your subconscious will adjust them, fill in gaps with your own imagery, smooth over details it cannot translate. The mountains you see may not look exactly as they do in their own world. The streets may be rearranged, the light altered. But the essence, the feeling of the place, may still carry through intact. When you wake from such dreams, the loss can be sharp. It is not the loss of an object or a person, but the loss of a setting, a backdrop to part of yourself you didn't know was missing. You might spend the morning trying to remember every corner, every detail before they fade. Sometimes you succeed in holding on to the images for a while. Other times they dissolve too quickly, leaving only the sense that you have left something behind. Whether these landscapes are entirely imagined or partly real, they serve as reminders of how vast the mind's capacity for place truly is. We carry not only the rooms and streets of our waking life, but countless others, some borrowed from memory, some spun from imagination, and perhaps a few that belong to worlds we will never see while awake. It happens in an instant. You're walking through a street you've never been to before, or speaking with someone you've only just met, and suddenly the air shifts. A quiet certainty settles over you. You have been here before. You have said these words. You have seen this view. The moment is not merely similar to something in your past. It is exactly the same. And yet, no matter how hard you search, you cannot find its match in your waking memory. This is déjà vu, a phenomenon so common that almost everyone has experienced it, and yet so elusive that science still cannot fully explain it. Some researchers believe it is the result of a small misfire in the brain's memory system, where the present moment is accidentally processed as if it were a memory. Others suggest it might be the mind briefly checking the present against a catalogue of similar situations and mistaking the resemblance for identity. These explanations are neat and tidy, but they do not capture the feeling itself, that warm, strange comfort of standing in a moment you're certain you already know. When you think of dreams that linger in memory, the ones that feel like they happened in a place you could almost return to, it is tempting to wonder if déjà vu might sometimes be a quiet bridge between sleep and waking life. Perhaps, on some nights, you dream of a conversation or a scene from a place that does not exist here. Then, days or years later, you encounter something close enough to that dream for the memory to rise unbidden, dressed in the certainty of "I have been here." If we allow for the possibility of dreams as windows into other realities, déjà vu takes on an even more intriguing shape. In this view, déjà vu is not a glitch but a recognition, the mind momentarily aligning with a scene that exists in both your world and another. The familiarity you feel might be the echo of having stood there in a different life, with a different set of choices behind you. Recurring symbols in dreams can work in a similar way. You might find yourself, again and again, in front of a certain door, or holding a particular object, or walking toward the same mountain. These symbols may mean nothing in waking life, yet they persist, returning like landmarks on a journey you're taking in pieces. In the language of parallel selves, these could be shared points, moments that exist across versions of reality, appearing to you in fragments during dreams and then, occasionally, brushing against your waking path. The feeling that comes with déjà vu is rarely unsettling. More often it is oddly reassuring, as though the universe has just reminded you that it is larger than you thought. In those few seconds, time feels less like a line and more like a circle, folding you into a moment you have already lived or will live again. There is a quiet relief in it, a reminder that your life is part of a pattern you may not fully see. Some people experience déjà vu so strongly in certain places that they are drawn back to them, searching for an explanation. They may walk the same streets over and over, waiting for the feeling to return, as if the place itself holds a secret they once knew. Others find the sensation strongest in conversations, where the words spoken match their memory exactly. Not just the words, but the pauses, the tone, the rhythm of the exchange. Science might say this is the brain's ability to predict and recognize patterns at work, an artifact of our highly tuned memory systems. And perhaps it is. But the personal experience of déjà vu, the way it arrives without warning, the way it feels like a quiet confirmation rather than a trick, leaves room for something more poetic. If your mind is capable of catching glimpses from other versions of reality during dreams, then déjà vu may be the waking residue of those glimpses, surfacing for only a heartbeat before it fades. When déjà vu pass, it often leaves behind a faint longing, like a song that cuts off mid-phrase. You want to stay in the moment, to see what comes next, but the feeling slips away as quickly as it arrived. This is part of its nature. It is not a place you can linger, only one you can pass through. Perhaps that is why it feels so precious. Déjà vu reminds you that there are connections between moments you cannot map, that there may be places where your dreams and your waking life overlap more closely than you realize. Whether those connections are purely the work of the mind or threads between worlds, they are worth noticing. They suggest that the boundary between here and elsewhere might be thinner than we think, and that sometimes, without trying, we find ourselves standing with one foot on either side. Now and then, a dream leaves you with something you did not have before. It might be a tune you've never heard, looping in your head when you wake. It might be a line of words that feels as if someone whispered it to you just before you open your eyes. It might be the outline of an idea, a solution to a problem you have been wrestling with for days or even months without success. Some of these dream gifts are small, no more than curiosities. Others are so striking that they change the course of a life. There are composers who have woken with entire pieces of music fully formed in their minds, ready to be written down. There are inventors who have seen the workings of a machine in a dream before they built it in the waking world. There are scientists who have found, in sleep, the missing step in an equation that refused to resolve while they were awake. The common explanation for such moments is that the mind continues to work quietly on problems during sleep, free from the noise of daily thought. Without the constraints of the conscious mind, connections form more easily, allowing ideas to emerge in ways that feel sudden, but have been building all along. And yet, when you are the one receiving such a gift, the feeling can be different. Sometimes the idea does not feel as if it came from you at all. If we imagine dreams as occasional windows into other versions of ourselves, then these moments might be more than the mind's private workshop. They could be glimpses of what another you has already done, the borrowing of something that exists elsewhere but not yet here. The song in your dream may be a song you wrote in another world, the invention a device you perfected there long ago. To you, it appears as inspiration. To that other self, it might simply be memory. There is a particular wonder in this thought, the idea that knowledge, beauty, and creativity could be shared across the boundaries of reality, not by force or design, but by the gentle drift of dreams. No grand machinery would be needed, no complicated translation, only the brief alignment of two lives long enough for something to pass from one to the other. You might never know the origin of such a gift. You might hum the melody for years without realizing it came from a place your waking self has never stood. But perhaps the source matters less than the fact that it arrived, that it added something new to your life. Sometimes the gifts are not practical at all, but emotional. A dream might give you the comfort of a conversation with someone who is gone, or the feeling of having been understood in a way that daylight rarely offers. You may wake with no solution to a problem, no song or invention, but with a sense of ease that allows you to face the day differently. These too could be messages from another self, not in the form of words or plans, but as the sharing of a state of mind. If you keep a dream journal, you may notice patterns in these moments. Certain dreams will stand apart, not because of their detail, but because of the quality they leave behind. You wake feeling enriched, as if you have returned from somewhere that gave you something. Not always something you can name, but something you can carry. In this way, the gifts from the other side are not limited to the rare and extraordinary. They might be small, almost invisible, changing your day in ways you cannot measure. They might be the reason you approach a conversation with more patience, or the reason you notice beauty in a place you had overlooked before. And in these small shifts, your waking life moves closer to the shape it might have taken in another world. It is possible that none of this is true in the literal sense, that all these gifts come from the deep wells of your own mind. But even in that view, there is still something profound about them. The idea that parts of you, hidden parts, can reach across the boundaries of sleep to hand you something you need is no less moving for being entirely internal. And if it is true, even a little, that some of these moments come from beyond yourself, then every night holds the possibility of connection. Every dream could be the meeting point of lives that will never see each other in the light of day, yet share their discoveries as naturally as breathing. When you next wake with a melody, a phrase, or an idea that feels strangely whole, you might pause before dismissing it as random. You might hold it gently in your mind and wonder, whose hands carried this to you and from what distant place? There is a moment, rare but unmistakable, when you are in the middle of a dream and something shifts. Perhaps it is a small inconsistency, a clock whose numbers are all wrong, a door that leads somewhere impossible, a voice calling you by a name you do not know. You notice it, and in noticing, you become aware. You realize you are dreaming. The streets, the sky, the people around you, all are part of a dream, and you are moving through it while knowing it is not the waking world. This is lucid dreaming, the state in which the dreamer becomes conscious of the dream while still inside it. Some people arrive there by accident, stumbling into lucidity without warning. Others learn to reach it deliberately, using gentle techniques that increase the chances of recognizing the dream while it is happening. It is often described as turning on the lights inside the dream, not because the dream was dark before, but because awareness sharpens every detail, making colours richer, sounds clearer, and the air itself more alive. The experience is often accompanied by a surge of excitement, a rush that can sometimes be strong enough to wake you entirely. But when you can hold steady, when you can remain in the dream without forcing it to dissolve, the possibilities expand. You can choose to fly, to walk through walls, to speak with anyone you wish, whether they are a memory, a stranger, or someone you have never met in this life. You can explore landscapes without the limits of waking physics, climbing mountains in a single step, or crossing oceans in the span of a breath. Lucid dreaming has been studied enough to be considered a genuine, observable state. Sleep researchers can identify it in laboratories by asking experienced lucid dreamers to perform agreed-upon eye movements once they become lucid. These signals show up in the data even while the body remains fully asleep. Yet despite its scientific validation, the experience retains a deep sense of mystery. It is not simply a playground for the mind. For some, it becomes a place of learning, healing, and profound curiosity. If we return to the idea of dreams as possible windows into other versions of reality, then lucidity takes on an even more intriguing role. In ordinary dreams, we drift, carried along by scenes we do not control. If those scenes sometimes contain impressions from other worlds, we may not notice them, or we may forget them upon waking. But in a lucid dream, you can stop, look around, and decide to explore. You can choose to walk toward the strange building on the horizon, instead of following the familiar street. You can ask the dream itself a question, "Where am I?" and listen to whatever answer comes. The answers may be nonsensical, or they may be startlingly coherent. Some lucid dreamers report conversations with figures in their dreams that feel distinctly other, as though the figure is not merely a projection of the dreamer's mind, but a presence with its own perspective. Whether or not this is literally true, the sensation of meeting something beyond yourself is often unforgettable. Lucidity also allows for remembering. In most dreams, the moment we wake, the edges begin to crumble. Details fade, sequences blur, and within minutes, the dream is gone. In a lucid dream, because you are aware, you can make the deliberate choice to fix certain details in your mind, to look closely, to repeat something to yourself, to anchor an image so firmly that it survives the return to waking. This can be especially valuable if you believe you are glimpsing something from elsewhere, as it gives you the chance to bring more of it back with you. Of course, there is also a caution here. The more control you try to exert over the dream, the more it bends toward your own imagination. A lucid dream can quickly shift from being a place you explore to being a place you construct entirely, filling it with whatever you expect to find. If you're interested in discovering what might be there without your influence, the challenge is to remain lucid but receptive, to walk through dream with awareness, but without taking over its design. For some, lucid dreaming is a skill that grows stronger with practice. Simple habits, like pausing during the day to ask yourself, "Am I dreaming?" or keeping a detailed dream journal, can make it easier to recognize the moment when you are. Over time, you may learn to extend the lucid state, to stay calm within it, and to use it as a space for quiet exploration. And perhaps, on certain nights, you might use that awareness for something more than wonder. If dreams can carry gifts, if they can connect you to another self across the veil, then lucidity could be the way to meet that self more directly. To walk into the dream knowing what it is, to reach out with a clear mind and see if someone, somewhere, reaches back. Once you become aware that you're dreaming, a new kind of possibility appears, not the power to reshape the dream into whatever you like, but the chance to try something gentler, more deliberate. You can treat the dream not only as a place to explore, but as a place where a conversation might happen, not just with fragments of your own mind, but with the possibility, however small, however uncertain, that someone else might be on the other side. In waking life, conversations follow certain rules. You speak, the other person replies. Words travel through the air. The pauses are filled with breathing, with thought, with the faint rustle of the world around you. In a dream, the rules are more fluid. The other person may not move their mouth when they speak, and you may not hear their voice with your ears. The words may arrive directly in your mind as if you had always known them. Sometimes the response is not in language at all, but in a feeling, a shift in the light, or the sudden appearance of an object in your hand. If you imagine that dreams can connect you to another version of yourself, then these moments could be the beginnings of an exchange. You may not know what you are sending or receiving. You may not even know if the other self is dreaming at the same time. But just as two radios tuned to the same frequency can catch fragments of each other's signal, two minds, in just the right conditions, might meet in the quiet space between worlds. Practicing this kind of dream conversation is less about control and more about openness. You can begin by setting an intention before sleep. Not a demand, not a fixed script, but a simple thought. If I become aware, I will listen, I will ask, I will see what comes back. In lucid dreams, this intention can guide your attention toward the figures you meet and the places you find yourself. Instead of changing them to match your wishes, you let them remain as they are, and you approach them with curiosity. The questions you ask in a dream might not always be in words. They can be in the way you stand still and take in your surroundings, or the way you hold an object and wait for it to reveal its meaning. You might think of someone, a friend you have never met in this world, perhaps, and see if the dream shifts to bring them closer. If they appear, you can pay attention to how they greet you, to what they seem to want to show you. Sometimes, these encounters feel unmistakably like part of your own mind, playful, unpredictable, bending toward whatever thought you had a moment earlier. Other times, they carry a subtle strangeness, as if the presence you are speaking with is shaped by something other than your own expectations. The conversation may be brief, a single glance, a single word, but the tone of it can stay with you long after waking. It is important to remember that a dream is a shifting environment. The other person in your dream may vanish if your focus drifts, or the landscape may change around you without warning. Holding on to lucidity while also staying receptive is a delicate balance. If you try too hard to force the exchange, the dream may bend toward your imagination, filling in the gaps with your own creations. If you relax too much, you may lose lucidity and simply drift back into the ordinary flow of dreaming. Some people who practice lucid dreaming keep a journal specifically for these kinds of interactions. They write down not only the words and images, but the sensations, the tone of the air, the feeling in their chest, the subtle shifts in the dream's rhythm. Over time, patterns may emerge, a certain figure who returns again and again, a symbol that appears whenever the exchange feels genuine, a place that seems to act as a meeting point. If we think of these dreams as practice, then each attempt is less about proof and more about building familiarity. You're learning the language of your dreaming mind, and perhaps, just perhaps, learning to tune it toward another voice. It may never become clear whether that voice belongs to another version of you, or to a deeper layer of yourself, or to something else entirely. But the act of listening, of reaching out, carries its own quiet meaning. And in some cases, you may carry something back from the conversation. Not a fully formed idea, not a clear message, but a feeling that colours your waking life. It might be a renewed sense of hope, a strange calm, or even a spark of curiosity that leads you to make a choice you would not have made otherwise. The influence is subtle, but real. You may never be able to prove that these exchanges cross any real boundary between worlds. But if they feel like bridges, if they remind you that there is more to the mind than its waking hours, then the practice is already worthwhile. Perhaps the real conversation is not only with another self, but with the mystery itself, that space where the edges between dreamer and dream blur, and you stand for a while in the possibility of being more than one life at once. It can be tempting, when thinking about parallel realities, to imagine each version of yourself as a completely separate being, a stranger wearing your face, walking through a different set of streets, shaped by choices you never made. But there is another way to picture it, one that is less about separation and more about connection. Imagine that all those versions of you are not isolated islands, but threads woven into the same fabric. Each strand has its own twists and colours, yet together they form a single weave. In this view, you're not one self among many. You're the whole weave itself, experienced from different points at once. The you sitting here now is simply the point where your awareness rests in this moment. Other points, other versions, may be busy with their own moments, their own challenges, their own small joys. And between you all, invisible bridges might carry more than you realize. Dreams could be one such bridge, not a wide, well-lit road, but a narrow crossing, the kind you might stumble onto without knowing, the kind that carries not full events but feelings, impressions, and flashes of imagery. You may dream of walking through a storm and wake with the lingering calm of having survived it, not realizing that the storm belonged to another life. You may dream of holding a child you do not know here, and wake with a warmth that stays in your chest for days. From the perspective of neuroscience, dreams are the product of memory consolidation, emotional processing, and the brain's tendency to create narratives from fragmented information. But even within this framework, there is room for mystery. If memory and emotion are the materials of dreams, could some of those materials drift across the thin borders between versions of you? Could joy or grief from another strand be felt here, woven into your own story without explanation? There are moments in waking life that resemble this. Sudden surges of emotion with no obvious cause, the sense of remembering something you never lived. We often dismiss these as quirks of mood or imagination, but they might be the waking equivalents of those dream bridges, the fabric pulling tight for just a moment, bringing 2 points close enough to touch. If all your selves are connected in this way, then the you know is part of a much larger being. The fears you face may be eased by victories elsewhere. The knowledge you gain here may help another version in ways you will never see. You're not a lone traveller, but part of a caravan moving across many roads at once. There is something comforting in this thought. It suggests that even in your most private struggles, you are not entirely alone. Somewhere, another version of you may have found a path through, and the faint trace of their resilience might reach you as a sudden strength you cannot explain. And in return, the courage you show here might ripple outward, a quiet gift to another self who needs it. This picture of many selves connected by a single thread is not so far from certain scientific models. In quantum mechanics, entangled particles remain linked in ways that ignore distance. Change one, and the other changes instantly. If consciousness in some form behaves like this, then perhaps your different versions are not as separate as they appear. Of course, it is only a metaphor, but metaphors can be ways of touching the truth without grasping it directly. Whether or not parallel selves are real, the image of the thread invites a way of living that is gentler toward yourself. It allows you to think of your life as part of a larger pattern, one in which every experience, even the ones that seem isolated or meaningless, contributes to the whole. The next time you wake from a dream that feels like more than a dream, you might hold it not as an isolated puzzle, but as a small message along the weave, one thread tugging gently on another. You may never know exactly what it meant, but you might still feel its place in the larger pattern, its quiet assurance that you belong to something more continuous than this single lifetime. And perhaps, if we carry that thought into waking, we begin to live as if connection is already the truth, not something to be proven, but something to be recognized. It is a question that has appeared in different forms across centuries and cultures, whispered by poets, pondered by philosophers, and contemplated by mystics. What if reality itself is a dream? Not simply your dream or mine, but a shared dream, vast, continuous, unfolding within a mind so immense that our own thoughts are like small ripples on its surface. The idea is not new. In ancient China, the philosopher Zhuangzi told the story of dreaming he was a butterfly, only to wake and wonder if he was truly Zhuangzi who had dreamed of being a butterfly, or a butterfly now dreaming it was Zhuangzi. Centuries later, in the West, thinkers like Descartes questioned how we could be sure of anything at all if our senses could be deceived, even in waking. And across other traditions, from the Hindu concept of Maya, the world as an illusion, to the Aboriginal dreamtime, reality has often been painted as something dreamlike in its foundations. Modern science, in its own way, brushes up against the same questions. Neuroscience tells us that everything we experience is a construction inside the brain. The light, the sound, the solidity of objects are not the world itself, but the mind's translation of electrical signals. Physics tells us that what appears solid is mostly empty space, and that particles behave differently when observed, as if awareness itself is part of the equation. In the borderlands between physics and philosophy, a few thinkers have suggested that consciousness might not simply arise from the universe, but might be part of its very fabric, a fundamental property woven into the structure of reality itself. If this is true, then dreaming may not be a small private event, but a reflection of something much larger. The way your mind constructs a dream world, complete with landscapes, people, sensations and events, may be a miniature version of what the universe is doing all the time. And if the universe itself is a kind of dream, then perhaps our own dreams are moments when we come closest to touching that shared act of creation. This perspective softens the boundaries between waking and sleeping. In waking life, we agree on certain rules. Gravity works, the sun rises, objects do not disappear when we look away. In dreams, the rules are looser, more personal, and yet they still form a reality that feels convincing while we're in it. The difference may not be absolute, but one of degree. Waking reality is simply the dream we all agree on, the one with more consistent physics and shared continuity. In this light, the possibility of parallel worlds becomes almost inevitable. If reality is a dream, it is unlikely to be the only one. Just as you dream many different dreams over the course of your life, the universal dream might be branching into countless variations, each as vivid and real to its inhabitants as this one is to us. Dreams could then serve as tiny openings in the wall, glimpses into other corners of the great dreaming, moments when the boundaries blur enough for one world to sense another. This idea does not need to replace the scientific explanations for dreams. The brain still processes memories, emotions, and information during sleep. It still sorts, filters, and replays fragments of the day. But within that activity, there may also be the possibility of resonance, of tuning into the deeper rhythm of the universe's dreaming, in which other versions of reality hum alongside our own. If that is so, then perhaps the most remarkable thing is not the existence of those other dreams, but the way we can carry something back from them. A feeling, an image, a fragment of music. These could be souvenirs from other rooms in the same house. And sometimes, when enough people catch similar echoes, the boundaries of this shared reality might shift just enough to let something new in. The question of whether we are dreaming the universe cannot be answered in a laboratory. It lives in the overlap between science and wonder. where we accept that not everything important can be measured, but it can change the way we move through our days. If this world is part of a greater dream, then every moment is part of its unfolding. Each conversation, each kindness, each quiet observation of sunlight through leaves. In this sense, the dream is not something to wake from, but something to wake within. You are not trapped in an illusion. You're a participant in an ongoing act of creation. And every night when you slip into sleep, you may be stepping into another part of that act, not leaving reality behind, but visiting another corner of the same vast dreaming that holds us all. There is a particular moment just before you wake, when the dream is still holding you. You are aware enough to feel the weight of your body in the bed, the faint pressure of the pillow beneath your cheek, yet part of you is still walking through the dream's world. The air in that place and the air in this one seem to mingle. Sounds fade in from both sides. For a few heartbeats, the two realities overlap, and you are both here and there. Your breathing is often what carries you across. In dreams, you rarely notice it. In waking, it is your anchor, steady, repetitive, a rhythm you have followed since birth. Between these two states, your breath becomes a kind of thread, weaving you back into the physical world. With each inhale, you take in the scent of your own room, the faint traces of fabric, of morning air or night's cool stillness. With each exhale, the dream grows lighter, fading like mist. This transition is one of the gentlest thresholds in life. We pass through it thousands of times, often without noticing, yet it contains its own kind of beauty. The mind moves from the fluid logic of dreams to the more structured light of day, and in that crossing, there is a chance to carry something back. Not in the way you might carry an object, but in the way you carry a mood, a memory, or a realization. Sometimes it is a feeling that survives the crossing, joy from an encounter you cannot explain, calm from standing beside a river that does not exist here. Sometimes it is an image, vivid enough to sketch, a pattern of light on a wall, a street lamp glowing in a fog of colours unknown to this world. And sometimes it is just the faint echo of something larger, a sense that you are part of a story that continues somewhere, even though your part in it is paused for now. Breath is what makes the return so gentle. If waking were a sudden snap, like a rope breaking, the dream would scatter, its pieces vanishing before you could gather them. But waking, like breathing, can be slow, a gradual re-entry, each breath bringing more of the room into focus while still holding on to the softness of where you've been. In this way, your body becomes the vessel that delivers you from one world to another, always steady, always patient. You might think of it as a kind of conversation between the two states. In the dream, you breathe without thinking, your body moving through its cycles while your mind roams elsewhere. In waking, you can choose to notice each breath, to let it guide your attention back to the present moment. And in that act of noticing, you honour both the dream and the waking world, the one for what it gave you, the other for receiving you back. There is comfort in knowing that the breath is constant in both places. Whatever world you find yourself in, a quiet street under alien stars, a familiar kitchen lit by morning sun, the rhythm is the same. Inhale, exhale. It is the simplest form of continuity, a reminder that even in the strangeness of dreams, something of you remains unchanged. If dreams are indeed windows into other lives, then breath is the doorway between them. You step through each night without effort, and each morning you step back. Sometimes you return with more than you left with. Other times, the dream is gone before you even open your eyes. But the doorway remains, and you will walk it again. In the quiet moments after waking, you can choose not to rush away from that threshold. You can lie still, letting the breath keep its slow pace, letting the last traces of the dream settle in your mind. These are the moments when you're most likely to remember, when the details are still close enough to catch. And even if they slip away, the feeling can remain, woven into the rhythm that carries you forward into the day. The breath that brings you back each morning is not just a return to the body, it is a reminder that you're always moving between states, between versions of yourself, between the seen and the unseen. You're never entirely in one place or the other, you're always in motion, always crossing small thresholds without noticing. To recognize this is to see that life itself is made of such crossings, and that each one has its own quiet grace. When most dreams fade, it is not the scenes or the details that linger, but the feeling. You may forget whether you were walking through a forest or a city, whether it was daylight or dusk, whether the people beside you had familiar faces or ones you have never seen. But the emotional weight, the joy, the ache, the longing, can stay with you, bright and steady, long after the images dissolve. Dream emotions have a curious strength. They do not require logic to feel real. You can love someone in a dream with a depth that feels like decades of shared history, even if you met them only moments before. You can feel the sharp edge of fear while standing in a place that offers no clear threat. You can be wrapped in a nostalgia so profound that it feels like remembering a home from childhood, except that the home never existed in this world. Neuroscience can trace part of this to the way the brain works during sleep. The emotional centers, particularly the amygdala, are often more active during dreaming than they are in waking life, while the parts of the brain that handle logic and critical thinking are quieter. Without the constant weighing and questioning of daylight, feelings are free to stretch out in all directions. They can fill the dream's entire space, shaping everything you see and hear around them. And yet, there is another way to look at it, one that fits with the idea of dreams as windows into other worlds. In this view, the emotions that survive waking are not just leftovers from the brain's nighttime activity. They are travelers, crossing from one reality to another. The love you feel for a stranger in a dream could be the echo of love from another life, carried across the veil without the rest of the story. The fear could be a warning from a self who has walked a darker road. The nostalgia could be the memory of a place you have never stood in this version of reality, but know deeply somewhere else. Because dreams are less about facts and more about atmosphere, feelings can slip through where detailed images cannot. The mind might not be able to carry the exact streets of a parallel city into waking life, but it can carry the sensation of walking them, the way the light felt on your face, the way your chest lifted when you turned a familiar corner. In this way, feelings become the map, not to a place you can draw, but to a place you might recognize if you ever found it again. This is why certain dreams seem to reach further into waking life than others. You might wake with a sadness you cannot explain, or a joy that colors the whole morning, even if you cannot remember why. The dream's images may have vanished, but the emotional current remains, flowing quietly beneath your thoughts, influencing your choices in ways you may never trace back to their source. Sometimes, these feelings return not in dreams but in waking moments that mirror them. A particular scent, a certain note in a song, the way sunlight falls through leaves, they can bring back the exact same emotional weight you felt in a dream, even if you cannot recall the dream itself. It is as if the current has found another way to reach you, reminding you that it is still there. If these emotions do come from beyond the boundaries of your waking life, then they might serve as subtle connections between all the versions of you that exist. Love, fear, longing, these are not confined to one lifetime. They are human constants, carried in different forms through every possible reality. And in dreams, where the usual barriers are softer, they might pass between versions more easily, leaving you with a piece of someone else's story stitched into your own. Even if the origin is purely within your own mind, the effect is the same. Dream emotions can change the texture of your waking life. They can shift your perspective, deepen your empathy, or make you more attuned to certain kinds of beauty. You may not know why, but you find yourself drawn to certain places, certain people, certain choices, as if, following a compass you cannot see. In the end, these feelings do not need a map. They are the map. They guide you not toward a specific destination, but toward moments that feel alive in the same way the dream did. They remind you that the boundaries between waking and dreaming, between this self and all the others, may be less solid than they seem, and that sometimes the surest path forward is the one you feel before you can explain. There are moments in waking life when your mind is still catching up, yet your heart has already decided how to feel. You might meet someone for the first time and feel an instant familiarity, as if you have known them for years. You might step into a place you have never visited and feel the strange comfort of belonging. Sometimes the feeling is the opposite, a sudden unease, a quiet warning that something is not right, long before you can explain why. We usually place these moments in the category of instinct or intuition, and science often traces them to subtle cues, body language, tone of voice, the way a space is lit or shaped. But there is another possibility, softer and more elusive, one that feels closer to the realm of dreams. What if some of these moments are not simply reactions to the present, but echoes from somewhere else? The emotional memory of a life you have not lived here, but have lived fully somewhere else. This is where emotional déjà vu comes in. Déjà vu is usually described as the feeling of having experienced a moment before, but emotional déjà vu is different. It is not about recognizing the arrangement of objects or the sequence of events. It is about recognizing a feeling. You might be walking down a street you have never seen, yet be filled with a very specific joy, or longing, or even heartbreak, as if the air itself carries a memory you cannot name. Dreams, with their loosened boundaries and heightened emotions, may be where this kind of recognition is rehearsed. In dreams you can meet companions who feel like family you have known all your life, even though they have no counterpart in your waking reality. You can share laughter, arguments, even quiet silences with them, and wake with the sense that those relationships are as real and layered as any you have while awake. Sometimes, when you later meet someone in this world who carries even the faintest trace of that dream companion's manner or spirit, the connection flares instantly, bypassing the need for explanation. It is tempting to explain these moments away as coincidence or imagination, and perhaps that is all they are. But if we allow for the idea of parallel selves, then these encounters could be the points where two versions of your life brush close enough for their emotions to cross over. The friend you know in a dream may be the same person you meet here, but in this world, the friendship is only beginning. The familiarity you feel is not an illusion. It is a fragment of shared history from another thread in the weave. Even without the framework of parallel worlds, the phenomenon still holds power. The brain is an extraordinary archivist, and it stores emotional patterns more deeply than it stores facts. You may forget the details of a dream, but if the dream taught you how it felt to be utterly safe in someone's presence, or how it felt to walk away from something you loved, that knowledge remains. And when waking life presents you with a moment that matches that emotional shape, the heart responds before the mind can analyze. The interesting thing is that these responses are not always pleasant. Just as dreams can leave you with unexplained joy, they can also leave you with warnings, a subtle tightening in the chest, a flicker of dread when nothing seems outwardly wrong. It may be that the dream's lesson was about danger, or loss, or the cost of ignoring your instincts. Whether or not these feelings come from another version of your life, they are still signals worth listening to. This is why, for some, dream journaling is not only about capturing images or plots, but about recording the emotions that surface during and after the dream. Over time, you may notice that certain feelings recur, not in the exact same setting, but in different disguises. That recognition can make it easier to trust your emotional responses in waking life, especially when they appear suddenly and without clear cause. If dreams are a place where the heart learns first, then waking is where that knowledge is tested. Every time you follow a sense of belonging into a new friendship, or respect a feeling of unease without needing to explain it, you're honouring that deeper form of recognition. You're allowing the heart's quiet wisdom, shaped by countless nights of wandering, to have a voice in the daylight. And maybe this is one of the most practical gifts dreams can give. Whether or not they're windows into other realities, they are certainly classrooms of the unseen. They let you practice feeling your way through situations without the usual limits of waking life. They let you explore what trust feels like, what danger feels like, what love feels like, in countless variations. And when those feelings return to you here, unannounced, you will already know what they mean, even if you cannot put it into words. In dreams, words are rarely the primary way meaning is carried. You may speak, you may listen, but more often the messages arrive as images, a key resting in your palm, a door that will not open, a bridge stretching into a fog that hides the other side. These are not random decorations in the scenery. They are the dream's own vocabulary, a language that belongs as much to the heart as to the mind. Psychologists have long studied symbols in dreams, tracing them to the subconscious mind's habit of disguising thoughts, fears, and desires in metaphor. A locked door may represent a problem you feel unable to solve. A bridge may stand for a transition, a crossing from one stage of life to another. These interpretations, though varied, rest on the idea that your mind speaks to itself in a symbolic code. But if we allow for the possibility that dreams can also be points of contact between different versions of yourself, then these symbols might serve a double purpose. They are not only messages from the deeper layers of your own mind, but shared signs between you and another self across the veil. Consider the key. In waking life, it opens something. A door, a box, a gate. In a dream, the act of being handed a key might be an invitation. Here is access you did not have before. If the dream is a bridge to another reality, perhaps the key represents knowledge or memory that is yours to use in both worlds. The door, too, has its obvious meaning. But in dreams, its behaviour matters more than its appearance. Does it open easily? Is it locked? Does it lead somewhere familiar or entirely new? Each variation could be a form of response, a way of saying yes, not yet, or look again. Bridges may be the most direct symbol of all. Their purpose is to connect two places, to carry you from one side to another. In waking life, a bridge is a fixed structure, stable underfoot. In dreams, it can be solid or fragile, a ribbon of stone, wood or light. It may rise high above water, sway over an endless drop, or disappear into a fog that leaves you uncertain whether to step forward. When you dream of a bridge, you're already at the threshold between here and somewhere else, whether that somewhere is another chapter of your own life or another reality altogether. Symbols have the advantage of being understood without translation. A key does not need words to convey its meaning. A bridge does not require an explanation to suggest crossing. If dreams are shared spaces between versions of you, then symbols may be the simplest way to send a message that survives the distortions of travel. While spoken language can shift in tone or lose precision, in the hazy logic of dreams, an image can carry its shape intact. Over time, you may notice that certain symbols recur in your dreams. They may change in small ways. A door in one dream is wooden, in another it is made of glass, but the core idea remains. Keeping track of these appearances can turn your dream journal into a kind of personal lexicon, a dictionary of the symbols that belong uniquely to your conversations across worlds. The more you recognize them, the more you can respond. The response does not need to be grand or complicated. It can be as simple as acknowledging the symbol when you see it, pausing in the dream to hold the key, to step through the door, to walk the bridge. That act of participation may be enough to complete the exchange, to let your other self know that you have received the message. In waking life, symbols can echo back to you in unexpected ways. You might see a particular shape, colour or object that stirs the same feeling as it did in a dream, even if the connection is not immediately clear. These echoes can serve as gentle reminders that the conversation does not end when you open your eyes. It continues in small, subtle ways, through the shapes and signs that pass through your day, waiting for you to notice. If dreams are indeed a kind of meeting ground, then symbols are the common ground within it. They are the images that both selves can understand without words, the quiet shorthand of a dialogue that stretches beyond the limits of time and place. You may never know exactly what each symbol means in its entirety, but perhaps you do not need to. Sometimes the recognition itself is enough, the moment of seeing and knowing that something is being said, even if the translation is still unfolding. And when you next step onto a bridge in a dream, when you next find a key in your hand or stand before a door, you might pause for a moment. Feel the weight of it, the promise it carries. Somewhere, perhaps, another you is standing at the same threshold, holding the same object, feeling the same quiet invitation to step forward. Some dreams end so quietly that you only realize later how deeply they have shifted you. There is no dramatic scene, no final message written in the sky, no clear voice telling you what to do. You wake, go about your day, and somewhere between breakfast and dusk, you notice that a choice you once hesitated over now feels simple, or that something you thought you wanted no longer pulls at you. The change is subtle, but it is there, like the slow turning of a tide you did not see begin. When dreams influence waking life, they often do so in ways that cannot be traced step by step. You might dream of standing on a bridge and, without thinking, choose in waking life to accept a new opportunity. You might dream of watching a door close and later find yourself stepping back from a path you had been walking toward. The link is not always logical, yet the timing feels too precise to be dismissed entirely. It is as if a part of you has been thinking ahead, quietly arranging the pieces so that when you return to waking life, the decision is already waiting, fully formed. If we allow for the idea of parallel selves, then perhaps some of these changes are the result of advice. Not advice spoken aloud, but advice shaped into the symbols and settings of a dream. Your other self may have no more power over your choices than you do over theirs, but they may be able to offer glimpses of what lies further down a path, to nudge your attention toward possibilities you had not considered. A dream is a safe place to show you the feel of a choice before you make it, to let you walk for a moment in a version of your life that has already answered the question. Even if we set aside the idea of other worlds, the effect remains. Your dreaming mind can stage the future in ways that your waking mind cannot. Freed from the strict rules of logic, dreams can test scenarios, explore alternatives, and allow you to experience the emotional weight of decisions without the cost of making them. You wake not with a list of pros and cons, but with a knowing, a quiet confidence that leans you in one direction or another. Sometimes the dream's influence is not about a single choice, but about the way you see the world. You might wake from a dream in which you are surrounded by kindness, and find yourself more willing to offer kindness in return. You might wake from a dream of loss and feel more grateful for what you have. Or you might wake from a dream that made no sense at all, yet left you with the unshakable feeling that life is larger, stranger, and more connected than you usually remember. These shifts in perspective can be as valuable as any decision, because they change the way you move through the everyday. You start to notice small details, the way light spills through a doorway, the way a stranger's laughter warms the air, the way your own breath feels steady in your chest. These are not extraordinary events, but they are moments of being fully awake within your life, and perhaps that is the truest gift dreams can leave behind. As we come to the end of this journey, you might picture the worlds we have spoken of, the parallel selves, the shared symbols, the emotional currents that move between sleeping and waking. Whether or not they are real in the physical sense matters less than the way they invite you to see your own life differently. They ask you to imagine that you are part of something larger, that your story is woven alongside many others, and that your dreams are more than private illusions. They are doorways, bridges, mirrors, and sometimes gentle messengers. And now, as the night deepens or the day begins to soften, you can let your thoughts drift toward the possibility that the next dream you have might be more than a passing flicker. It might be a quiet conversation with another you, or a rehearsal for a choice yet to come, or simply a gift of beauty to carry back into the waking world. So when you close your eyes, let the door remain slightly open. Let the bridge extend into the mist. Let the key rest lightly in your hand. Somewhere perhaps another self is walking toward you, carrying their own symbols, their own small truths. You may meet in a place that belongs to neither world and both at once, and for a while you may share the same horizon. And if sleep comes gently now, let it. You do not need to chase the dream or hold it too tightly. You will find each other again, in another night, in another breath, in another version of the world where the boundaries are soft and the air is filled with the hum of something vast and kind. Until then, rest in the knowledge that you are both here and everywhere, awake and dreaming, alone and accompanied. The night will keep you, and so will the dream.